Welcome to part 2 of our series on the history of US presidential debates. In our first episode, we covered the period up to 1988. In this episode, we'll explore the years leading up to 2004. If you're ready to witness the events that shaped our time, let's dive back in where we left off.
Read my lips. No new taxes.
George H.W. Bush was inaugurated on January 20, 1989, succeeding Ronald Reagan. His presidency coincided with a period of significant global change. The fall of the Berlin Wall, the collapse of the Soviet Union, and the reunification of Germany were major achievements, alongside the success of Operation Desert Storm, which drove Iraqi dictator Saddam Hussein's forces out of Kuwait. These victories cemented Bush's image as a strong and experienced leader. In 1991, Bush's approval ratings soared to an all-time high of 89%, largely due to these foreign policy successes. But as the economy weakened, things shifted. The country slipped into a mild recession in 1990, and by mid-1991, unemployment reached 7.8%. With a growing federal budget deficit, Bush had to backtrack on his 1988 campaign promise, "Read my lips, no new taxes." The focus shifted from international triumphs to economic troubles, and his approval ratings dropped dramatically, from 89% to the low 40s within a year. As the 1992 election neared, the Democratic Party found itself in an identity crisis. After losing 5 of the last 6 presidential elections, the party needed new leadership. Many top candidates declined to run, discouraged by Bush's earlier high approval ratings. However, Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton emerged as a serious contender. Initially little known, Clinton became more prominent after rumors of extramarital affairs surfaced. He used this attention to position himself as a centrist, or New Democrat, offering a fresh direction for the party. The Democratic nomination was competitive early on, but Clinton soon gained momentum, securing 3,400 delegates compared to his closest rival's 600. He broke with tradition by choosing Tennessee Senator Al Gore as his running mate. Both were Southerners, but Gore's reputation as a devoted family man helped balance out Clinton's personal scandals. Meanwhile, Ross Perot entered the race as one of the most serious independent candidates in modern U.S. history. A successful billionaire entrepreneur, Perot masterfully benefited from the public frustration with the federal budget deficit and dissatisfaction with the political establishment. By June, Perot was leading national polls with 39% support, ahead of Bush at 31% and Clinton at 25%. However, Perot's unexpected withdrawal from the race in July, for reasons that were unclear, caused his support to decline. Clinton's campaign, however, gained traction. He focused on bridging the widening gap between the rich and poor, which had grown under Republican policies. His poll numbers jumped from the mid-20s to over 50% within weeks. In response, the Bush campaign turned to familiar tactics, attacking Clinton's character and highlighting allegations of infidelity and draft dodging. But this time, the country's economic concerns overshadowed Bush's foreign policy achievements. By October, Perot re-entered the race, giving hope to Republicans that he could split the vote and prevent any candidate from securing a majority, sending the decision to Congress. Perot's aggressive campaign strategy managed to tuck away some more votes from Clinton, narrowing the gap between Clinton and Bush. In this context, the candidates agreed to 3 debates. It marked the first time more than 2 candidates participated in a presidential debate in the same time. The first debate, held on October 11th, featured Perot as the outsider, speaking for the people, while Clinton focused on the need for change and new investments in America's future. Bush emphasized his experience and international success, in the meantime focused on attacking Clinton's character. One key moment came when Bush questioned Clinton's patriotism, referencing Clinton's protests during the Vietnam War. The back and forth between Bush and Clinton allowed Perot to shine. A CNN, USA Today poll showed 47% of viewers thought Perot won the debate, compared to 30% for Clinton and 16% for Bush. The second debate, held on October 15th, introduced a new format, the town hall debate, where candidates took questions directly from undecided voters. Clinton excelled in this setting, making emotional connections with the audience. One exchange about the recession showcased his empathy for voters' struggles, which resonated with many. However, the most memorable moment of the debate was the moment that the President Bush checked his watch.
Question right here.
Yes, how has the national debt personally affected each of your lives, and if it hasn't?
Later, in an interview with Jim Lehrer, Bush reflected on the watch-checking moment and how it affected his campaign. "I took a huge hit. That's another thing I don't like debates. You look at your watch and they say that he hasn't any business running for president. They made a huge thing out of that. Now, was I glad when the damn thing was over? Yeah, and maybe that's why I was looking at it, only 10 more minutes of this crap." Clinton was widely seen as the winner of the second debate, with 58% of viewers favoring his performance. The third debate, held on October 19th, returned to a more traditional panel format, with Perot again standing out slightly. Polls showed 37% thought Perot won, while 28% favored Clinton and Bush. By the end of the debate season, polls showed Clinton leading with 40 to 45% of support, while Bush was between 30 to 40%. Perot regained some support, polling between 15 to 20%. On November 3, 1992, Bill Clinton won the election, becoming the 42nd President of the United States. He secured 370 electoral votes compared to Bush's 168, and took 43% of the popular vote, ahead of Bush's 37.4% and Perot's 18.9%. Though Perot didn't win any states, his performance was the strongest by a non-major party candidate since Theodore Roosevelt in 1912. And thus, the Clinton era began. Clinton's first term was challenging. His focus was on reducing the $290 billion federal budget deficit he had inherited from George H.W. Bush. A long-standing issue from the 1980s, Clinton led the successful passage of the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act, which aimed to cut the deficit in half over 4 years through tax increases and spending cuts. Despite this effort, the stagnant economy led to Democratic losses in the 1994 midterms, and Republicans gained control of both the Senate and the House. 1995 and 1996 saw several government shutdowns, as the Republican-controlled Congress clashed with Clinton. However, Clinton emerged victorious in the public image battle, forcing Republicans to compromise on their push for more tax cuts. His budget reforms started to take effect, and the deficit shrank each year. By the time the 1996 election season began, the economy was improving, with unemployment falling from 7% to 5%, and Clinton's approval rating had risen above 50%. With his approval rising, Clinton and Vice President Al Gore easily secured the Democratic ticket for a second term. On the Republican side, several prominent figures, including Colin Powell and Dick Cheney, were considered as potential candidates but ultimately declined to run. The party eventually rallied behind Senate Majority Leader Bob Dole, a veteran politician with over 25 years in the Senate. Dole, who had served as President Gerald Ford's running mate in the 1976 election, had already made 2 unsuccessful bids for the presidency, in 1980 and 1988. However, in 1996, he became the Republican nominee. Meanwhile, Ross Perot entered the race again, this time under the U.S. Reform Party, though public interest in him was much lower than during his 1992 campaign. Clinton's early ticket win allowed him to launch an aggressive TV campaign targeting undecided voters in swing states, while Dole was still navigating the nomination process. Clinton used this head start to portray Dole, who was 73 years old, as an out-of-touch conservative from a different generation, while Clinton emphasized building a future. Dole's campaign struggled to change this perception, especially after references to a long-gone baseball team from Brooklyn and an infamous fall during a rally. Clinton's campaign didn't directly address Dole's age but subtly built its message around the future, contrasting with Dole's frequent references to World War II and the Great Depression. Dole also promised a 15% tax cut, but this raised concerns about the growing budget balance. As the election neared, Clinton held a comfortable lead, with polls in September showing him ahead by 9% to 20%. Perot, meanwhile, polled between 4% and 8%, failing to meet the 15% threshold needed to participate in the presidential debates. The candidates agreed to 2 debates, but public interest was lower than in 1992. Where the 1992 debates had drawn 60-70 million viewers each, the 1996 debates saw only 30-40 million. Clinton proudly took credit for the improving economy, while Dole could only argue that Clinton was exaggerating or unfairly taking all the credit.
President, I said we'd cut the deficit in half in 4 years. We cut it by 60%. I said that our economic plan would produce 8 million jobs. We have 10.5 million new jobs.
Again, I mean, it's a line that's been used before, but exaggerating all the things that he did.
Dole was more assertive when it came to foreign policy, criticizing Clinton's approach as inconsistent. One memorable moment occurred when Dole attacked Clinton for being soft on the war on drugs, highlighting Clinton's past use of marijuana and the rise in drug use during his time as governor of Arkansas. However, Clinton skillfully neutralized this weakness by creating empathy with the viewers, sharing personal stories and emphasizing his commitment to fighting drug abuse. It was truly a moment to see.
The record is clear. The record is pretty clear in Arkansas. When you're governor, drug abuse doubled.
And you voted to cut services to 23 million school children under the Safe and Drug-Free Schools Act. I don't think that means you're soft on drugs. We just have a different approach. But let me remind you that my family has suffered from drug abuse. I know what it's like to see somebody you love nearly lose their lives.
Overall, the debate was civil and largely devoid of personal attacks, except for this exchange. Clinton was generally seen as the winner, showcasing a more dynamic image and focusing on his economic achievements. Dole, despite his best efforts, couldn't shift the momentum. Polls remained steady after the debates, and Clinton maintained his strong lead. On election day, Clinton secured a decisive victory, winning 379 electoral votes to Dole's 159. Clinton received 49.2% of the popular vote, with Dole at 40.7% and Perot at 8.4%. This made Clinton the first Democratic president to win back-to-back elections since Franklin D. Roosevelt. Clinton's second term can be summed up by 2 contrasting stories: economic success and the Clinton-Lewinsky scandal. The scandal erupted in 1998 when it was revealed that President Bill Clinton had engaged in an extramarital affair with Monica Lewinsky, a 22-year-old White House intern. Clinton initially denied the relationship in a televised statement, famously saying that,
I want you to listen to me. I'm going to say this again. I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky.
However, evidence later emerged, including Lewinsky's testimony and physical evidence, which forced Clinton to say that,
Indeed, I did have a relationship with Miss Lewinsky that was not appropriate. In fact, it was wrong.
The scandal led to Clinton's impeachment by the House of Representatives on charges of perjury and obstruction of justice. However, the Senate acquitted him, and Clinton remained in office, with the Senate vote ending in a 50-50 split, well short of the 2/3 majority required for removal. Despite the scandal, Clinton's approval ratings remained remarkably high, largely thanks to the strong economy. Under his leadership, the U.S. saw its longest period of peacetime economic expansion. The budget deficit was turned into a surplus for the first time since the 1960s, fueled by the rapid expansion of internet technology and a booming stock market. The Dow Jones Industrial Average quadrupled during the 1990s, and by 2000, unemployment had dropped to 4%, with the poverty rate at 11.3%. Clinton left office with a 66% approval rating, the highest for a departing president since approval ratings began being measured in 1952. Surpassing Reagan's record by 3%. Just as the success of the Reagan era paved the way for his vice president, George H.W. Bush, to secure the Republican nomination, Clinton's achievements made his VP, Al Gore, a strong contender for the presidency. As expected, Gore easily won the Democratic nomination without any difficulty. On the Republican side, a strong network within the party rallied around former President George H.W. Bush's son, George W. Bush, as the leading candidate. The Bush family was highly influential in Republican politics, with George W. Bush serving as the governor of Texas and his brother, Jeb Bush, as the governor of Florida. Although experienced Arizona Senator John McCain initially gained momentum in the early primaries, the intense competition eventually led him to concede as Bush's advantage grew, and he dropped out of the race. Bush's popularity as the successful governor of Texas, winning record-high 70% of the vote in his 1998 re-election, gave him a strong start, with his campaign focusing on compassionate conservatism. He promised tax cuts, improved education under the slogan, "No Child Left Behind," and restoring integrity to the White House, an implicit critique of the Lewinsky scandal. While foreign policy was not the focal point of Bush's campaign, he criticized Clinton's use of military intervention in European conflicts, particularly in Yugoslavia. Bush began the election season with a comfortable lead, but by September, the race had tightened. Polls showed varying results, with some like Gallup giving Gore a 10% advantage, while others, like CNN, showed the candidates tied. Bush faced several setbacks during this period, including mishandling debate negotiations and making comments that contradicted his overall message. On the other hand, Al Gore promised to continue the economic success of the Clinton-Gore era, emphasizing the careful fiscal policies of recent years. At the same time, he sought to distance himself from Clinton due to the potential fallout from the Lewinsky scandal. Gore also highlighted George Bush's inexperience, noting that Bush had only 5 years of high-level public service. Bush's failure to remember the names of the presidents of India, Pakistan, and Chechnya during a TV show quiz allowed Gore to further emphasize his opponent's lack of foreign policy knowledge.
Stability of the country, and I think that's good news for the subcontinent.
And you could name him.
General, I can name the general.
And it's
General.
Prime Minister of India?
The new Prime Minister of India is, no.
As the debates approached, the candidates agreed to 3 sessions, scheduled for October 3rd, 11th and 17th. Expectations were high for Gore, given his extensive government experience. However, Bush's team had been rigorously preparing for 5 months, holding 15 mock debate sessions. New Hampshire Senator Judd Gregg, who had worked closely with Gore in the Senate, played the role of Gore in Bush's preparation. Reflecting on the process, Gregg offered insight into their strategy, saying, "I'd spent 2 months trying to fully absorb how Gore thought, what his policies were, and how I believed he would react to Bush. Gore and I had served in the House together, very, very smart, but extremely arrogant. I did my best to be Gore." According to Bush's policy advisor, Robert Zoellick, the team prepared for over 50 topics but strategically chose to focus on just 3 or 4 key issues that could persuade voters to seek change. Engaging Gore on a wider range of topics would have been counterproductive, given the information asymmetry between the 2 candidates. Meanwhile, Gore's preparation began much later, in the summer, with former Congressman Tom Downey as his preparation partner. Early in their preparations, Downey received an anonymously sent package containing a videotape and documents about Bush's debate strategy. After briefly reviewing the materials, Downey turned them over to legal authorities and discarded himself from further involvement in Gore's debate preparations. Gore's team noticed a troubling pattern during his preparation. His new debate partner, strategist Paul Begala, later revealed to a journalist that during their mock debate sessions, Gore often showed clear contempt for Bush, frequently sighing, frowning, or rolling his eyes. The team advised Gore to manage his frustration more constructively, suggesting he look down or take notes instead. According to Begala, Gore's body language was sending a message: "My opponent is an idiot and doesn't deserve to be here with me." When the first debate began, the conversation seemed balanced if you just listened to the candidates. However, Gore's repeated interruptions, combined with his sighing, eye-rolling, and visible frustration, quickly shifted the tone. While Gore's responses were solid in terms of content, his body language, showing clear contempt for Bush, along with his mechanical delivery and overused phrases like "lockbox," ended up hurting his performance. Though Gore may have won on political points, his dismissive demeanor ultimately turned the debate in Bush's favor. The first debate damaged Gore's self-confidence, and in the second debate, he attempted to present a more agreeable version of himself. However, the damage had already been done, and Bush emerged as the clear winner of the second debate. The third debate, held in a town hall format, was where Bush's extensive preparation truly paid off. Bush's team had anticipated Gore's tendency to invade personal space with his assertive body language and prepared for the moment. During the debate, when Gore moved close to Bush in an attempt to assert dominance, Bush calmly executed his rehearsed move, glancing at Gore and smiling, turning the moment into an awkward and forced gesture from Gore.
What's your position on issues? But can you get things done? And I believe I can. All right.
What about the Dental Norwood bill?
Ultimately, Bush's relaxed demeanor and Gore's missteps in body language shifted the momentum of the campaign. The election, held on November 7, 2000, became one of the closest in U.S. history. Although Al Gore won the popular vote by over 540,000 votes, Bush secured victory in the Electoral College with 271 votes to Gore's 266. The election came down to Florida, where Bush won by a margin of just 537 votes, leading to weeks of legal and political battles over the results. On December 13, 2000, Gore conceded the race. Considering how narrow the margin was, it's fair to say the debates played a crucial role in shaping the outcome. This election opened the George W. Bush era, a presidency that would soon face world-changing events. Just 8 months into Bush's presidency, that world-changing event has occurred.
Hi, babe. What are those people gonna do?
At 8:46 a.m. on the morning of Tuesday, September 11, 2001, an American Airlines plane crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center in New York City, a landmark that housed approximately 50,000 people. While the world watched in confusion, 17 minutes later, a second plane crashed into the South Tower. 34 minutes after that, another United Airlines plane hit the Pentagon, the headquarters of the U.S. Department of Defense. At 9:59 a.m., the South Tower collapsed. 4 minutes later, at 10:03 a.m., another United Airlines plane crashed into a field in Pennsylvania, as passengers overpowered the hijackers. Speculation suggests the target may have been the White House. The tragic sequence ended at 10:28 a.m., when the North Tower collapsed. In 1 hour and 42 minutes, the lives of nearly 3,000 people were lost, and the world witnessed the unfolding tragedy live on television. This catastrophe would define the presidency of George W. Bush and change the course of history. For a president who had criticized the Clinton-Gore administration for its unnecessary use of military power, Bush now had no choice but to focus his entire presidency on the war against terrorism. Until then, the biggest attack the American people had experienced was Pearl Harbor during World War II, almost 3,900 kilometers from the mainland. The U.S. mainland was long considered untouchable, but for the first time, Americans felt a direct threat on their own soil. National security, counterterrorism, and foreign policy would dominate Bush's presidency and the upcoming election. Although al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden initially denied involvement in the attacks, CIA reports quickly confirmed the organization's responsibility. Less than a month later, on October 7, the US launched an invasion of Afghanistan after the Taliban refused to expel al-Qaeda and extradite its leaders. As the US military entered Afghanistan, President Bush's approval ratings soared to a record 90%. Ironically, his father had held the previous record after the successful Gulf War operation against Iraq in 1991. The invasion of Afghanistan was completed in just over 2 months, led by NATO coalition forces, but bin Laden managed to escape into the White Mountains. By 2003, Bush's approval ratings had dipped to 57%, but the invasion of Iraq, aimed at disarming weapons of mass destruction, boosted his popularity once again, peaking at 71%. However, as the UN weapons inspectors had reported, no weapons of mass destruction were found, and no direct link to al-Qaeda was proven. The capture of Iraq's overthrown president, Saddam Hussein, in December 2003 brought a surge of optimism to the country and silenced the last hopes of the anti-war faction within the Republican Party. This paved the way for President Bush to secure his party's nomination for re-election without opposition. On the Democratic side, Vermont Governor Howard Dean emerged as the early favorite. Dean was a visionary candidate, pioneering internet-based campaigning, online fundraising, and grassroots organizing. His innovative approach allowed him to raise significantly more funds than his competitors and become the front-runner. But then, the infamous Dean Scream moment happened.
Washington and Michigan, and then we're going to Washington, D.C. to take back the White House! Ah!
This infamous scream went viral, casting serious doubts about Dean's viability within the Democratic Party. It changed the whole course of his campaign. Gradually, his momentum shifted toward Massachusetts Senator John Kerry. After securing the nomination, Kerry made an unexpected move by proposing Republican Senator John McCain as his running mate, but McCain declined. Meanwhile, the 2004 Democratic National Convention saw the rise of a future president, Senate candidate Barack Obama, whose keynote speech in support of Kerry gained national attention and elevated him within the Democratic Party. Democratic candidate John Kerry's strategy for the election was to steer the conversation towards domestic issues, attacking Bush's failure to create new jobs and pointing out the growing budget deficit, which had been eliminated during the Clinton administration. On the other hand, Bush's focus was on portraying himself as a decisive leader making significant progress in the fight against terrorism. On the Iraq War, Kerry criticized Bush for sending the military on a wrong mission. Bush fired back, calling Kerry a flip-flopper for voting in the Senate to authorize the war and then later opposing it, making him seem unreliable and untrustworthy in leading the fight against terrorism. As the debates approached, Bush held a 7 to 8 point lead in the polls. The candidates agreed to 3 debates. The first debate took place on September 30th, with over 60 million viewers tuning in. One memorable conspiracy theory from the debate revolved around a mysterious bulge in the back of Bush's suit, sparking speculation that he might have been receiving prompts from his team during the debate, especially after he said, "Let me finish," when no one had interrupted him.
As the politics change, his positions change, and that's not how a commander-in-chief acts. Let me finish. The intelligence I looked...
During the debate, one of the standout moments came when Kerry criticized the limited international involvement in the Iraq War, mentioning only the US, UK, and Australia. Bush's response became a catchphrase used by Bush's detractors to mock his response.
And we went in, there were 3 countries, Great Britain, Australia, and the United States. That's not a grand coalition. We can do better.
30 seconds.
Well, actually, he forgot Poland.
Bush was also criticized for his negative body language, including frequent scowls during the debate. Post-debate polls showed Kerry as the clear winner of the first round. The second debate, held on October 8, took place in a more comfortable town hall format. Bush appeared more relaxed and tried to be more easygoing than in the first debate. Observers were split on whether the debate ended in a draw or was a slight victory for Kerry. The third and final debate, held on October 13, had its most controversial moment when Kerry mentioned Vice President Dick Cheney's daughter, who is openly gay, during a discussion about gay marriage. Cheney later condemned Kerry for using his daughter's sexuality to make a political point. Kerry was widely seen as the winner of the final debate, and the other debates were either considered close or ended in a draw. Polls after the debates showed a tight race between the 2 candidates. However, it wasn't the debates that ultimately determined the outcome of the election. Just 4 days before the election, a video of al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden was released, in which he claimed responsibility for the 9/11 attacks and criticized President Bush for deceiving the American people. The timing of this video had a profound effect on the race, with polls showing a sudden 6-point lead for Bush. On November 2, 2004, Bush won the election by a narrow margin of 35 electoral votes, securing 50.7% of the popular vote, while Kerry won 48.3% and 251 electoral votes. The timing of bin Laden's video remains a subject of controversy, as it's widely believed that without its release, the results in key swing states like Ohio, Nevada, New Mexico, and Iowa might have tipped the election in Kerry's favor. We arrive at the end of part 2 of our documentary. The following years would usher in a new era, one that could be seen as either a hero's rise or a divisive force, depending on your perspective. Debates would grow more intense, campaigns more negative, and the political landscape more polarized than ever before. If you enjoyed this video and want to be notified about part 3 of this series, where we explore this dramatic shift, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications. Thank you for watching.